Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today we're diving into the world of creative sound design for short films. This conversation comes from a panel discussion we hosted at this year's Aspen Shortsfest, which is one of the premier film festivals in the world devoted entirely to short films and the filmmakers who make them. So how do you build a powerful soundtrack for a short film? How do you collaborate with your sound team when time is tight and resources are so limited? To help us unpack all of that and more, we're joined by an amazing lineup of filmmakers from this year's festival. Lindon Feng and Hannah Palumbo, the directors of A Bear Remembers, Bhose, who directed The Cost of Hugging, and Elham Ehsas, who directed There Will Come Soft Rains. Together, they share how they approach storytelling through sound, and how the right creative choices in the sound design and mix can utterly transform a film no matter its length. Let's jump into it. So let's start with A Bear Remembers, and we have about a 3-minute clip from each one of these films, and hopefully you've had a chance to see them play so that this isn't out of context. I'm not going to set up the clip from A Bear Remembers because we're literally showing the first 3 minutes of the film. So enjoy this clip from A Bear Remembers. Aaron, let's roll.
Well, I think at first it was quite novel and quite kind of exciting, and everyone was kind of sort of taken aback by what it was, and we didn't really know. I think as it's gone on for more time, people have kind of grown quite tired of it.
You know, these hills have had their fair share of history and trouble, but for a long time, Grey Hill's been a peaceful place to live. And I think its noise is just such a massive disruption for the community. And no one seems to have any answer for us.
It's been months. I've tried literally everything. Playing loud music. Or, I even got my boys to put mattresses up against the windows. You can't block it out. It's not that kind of noise.
Hi, I'm Sue. It's a good spot you got up there.
Oh yeah, I always get my best footage from up here. I'm actually also a filmmaker. I've got a drone.
Great. We actually just wanted to grab a quick shot of the old ruins.
You shouldn't film the ruins. You should go further up Grey Hill, past where the wind farm is. Looks a bit flat and boring at the top, but I got something so cool there a few days ago. Also, there's a really good view looking down at the town, so it's worth the walk. You can use my footage. I won't charge you.
Look, have fun with your drone, mate.
I've got it right here. If you just wait a second,
Obviously I had to pick this movie to talk about because it's all about sound. And in terms of like using sound for creative storytelling, I love a film that revolves around a mystery about sound. So tell us a little bit about how you chose this for the framework of the film and how you kind of lighted on this as the way to get into the story.
So the short film is based or developed from a feature film idea that we have. And in the feature film, there is no mysterious sound. It follows this ancient spirit over different generations, and you go on this journey with the spirit. And we wanted to be able to adapt this into a short as proof of concept, but the issue we were having was how do we get into the story and what can drive that to meeting the spirit in the first place? And so we felt like putting it into the container of a mystery would be the right way to go to introduce audiences to this spirit being. And we just suddenly were like, well, what about this strange sound people can't identify? And how do we have the presence of the spirit felt in the community and in the space, but that we don't actually see it? So sound was the only thing that was kind of left to us then.
Yeah, I think also, I'm sure you get a lot of these stories in the States as well, but in the UK you get quite a lot of, there's a town that has a mysterious like humming noise that like no one can tell where it's coming from, and everyone gets really up in arms about it. And I think we saw something like that. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's an interesting avenue that we can kind of package our story into potentially.
Counterintuitively, I want to ask you also just about the visual look of the film and the tone, because I feel like that also kind of informs your approach to the sound design. So, obviously you shot in 4:3, and the opening, few shots of the film are archival, or well, they're TV news footage, right? And I'm kind of curious about how you arrived at that decision and the tone, because the first time I saw the film, I actually, for the first 60 seconds, thought that it was a documentary. And so I'm kind of curious about, were you purposefully playing with that as a narrative style, and how, that question, and also kind of the visual style and how that influenced your approach to the sound?
I mean, I think for us, the film is all about memory and all about remembering things and all about kind of things from the past getting lost. So to our mind, 4:3 felt like a very obvious place to go with it. And I think we wanted to have a very bric-a-brac, DIY, archival feel at the opening, because when we were talking about it between the two of us, I think we were always saying that we wanted the whole film to feel like a weird artifact that you discover almost.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as I think to what Hannah's saying about the 4:3 feeling more memory-like, it's a smaller window. So it's not like you're seeing these epic landscapes which are super wide and you're getting the whole picture. You're seeing like a select little bit which is like a memory or something. So like when you see the landscapes, like you can tell we were shooting in some amazing places, but we're not doing like anamorphic or something super wide where you take it all in. You're only getting like a little sliver of that. And I think the sound is building up the whole universe, which is beyond that. So it's like you're seeing into this memory, this period of time, and you're hearing something which is vast and all-encompassing. So I think that kind of that dichotomy, or that kind of relationship between a smaller portion of image and a much wider portion of sound, and that's how they kind of live together.
I love that. It's actually something I love to talk about when filmmakers get creative about using sound to kind of paint the world that's happening outside of the frame. And it's one of the things that, when I'm talking with student filmmakers, I always try to emphasize the point that like sound, as a storyteller, you get so much bang for your buck out of sound as opposed to trying to shoot stuff. And, there's so many great examples, to pull an example from the world of big budget studio filmmaking. But, when I used to run Skywalker Sound, and when we were there, we did a little Steven Spielberg movie called Saving Private Ryan. That opening sequence when they stormed the beach at Normandy, Spielberg purposely wanted to shoot it like a documentary. So it's handheld. A lot of it is more or less in close-up. There's surprisingly few wide-angle vistas of the storming of the beach, but the sense of size and scale of that sequence is really communicated through the sound. And it's a great example that I show to students sometimes about how to paint the world outside of the frame. And I love what you were talking about that it's almost like looking through a keyhole, right? I'm also struck by, and it becomes more apparent as you watch the film, I'd love for you to talk sort of about your decisions about music, because there's certainly moments sometimes on some of those wide vistas, and if you haven't seen the film, we're doing our best not to spoil things, but the characters do go on a journey through the hills to sort of track down the source of this mysterious sound. And you got a lot of big vistas, and it might have been a moment for a nice music cue, but you use ambiances and wind, and it reinforces this real sense of melancholy. And so I'd love for you to talk about that and your approach to when to use music and when not to use music and when to lean on sound design.
So I think our film revolves around a diegetic sound, a sound that the characters of the film can hear. It was so hard to establish that as soon as you brought anything else in, or if the sound itself was too score-like, then it became score. So we really had to pull it back, and I think we both love music, we love score. So it was really like an exercise of restraint to be like, there's like 3 points in the film where you have music, and we would have loved to have been loads of points, but actually it was just the only thing that matters here is telling the story that this sound is kind of persistent and haunting this community. And so the music just purely became in very heightened moments in the second half of the film, I would say.
Yeah, and I think in terms of kind of how we developed the feel for the score, I think we knew that we wanted to end on the credits on a full folk song. It's the first proper snippet of the community that eventually gets revealed by the end of the film. That's the only time as an audience you ever get to see it in its pure form. So we knew we wanted to end there, and we weren't sure like how much of a presence that kind of folk singing would have through it. So we played around with lots of different things. We kind of had it how it is in the credits earlier in the film, and in the end, this really fragmented, broken up, kind of this wistful, half-remembered tune kind of energy to it. That's what really hit the hardest and what felt the saddest, I think. But it was an exploration with our composer and also with our sound designer the whole way through. It was never an immediate, obvious choice. We kind of had to feel it out with the film as we were going.
I'd love for you to elaborate on that and just talk a little bit about, the creative conversations you had with your sound designer and your composer. And I would imagine that you probably went down a rabbit hole or two and did some experimentation that didn't work out. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I think is a little bit of a mystery to a lot of young filmmakers is how do I engage with these artists? How do I talk about sound, and how do I talk about music?
And I think it's so different project to project. We've never done a project before which is this reliant on sound for the storytelling. We actually started maybe 4 months before shooting. We started working with a very close friend, Johnny, who did all the score. We started working with him on the score, and he started developing folk songs and like, what would the lyrics be for these folk songs, and what did this community, what was their life? Would they sing about agricultural issues or the weather? Like, because, it's true, like we were filming in the Welsh mountains or hills. So like their needs of this community, they'll be singing about different things to if they were living in a valley or in the snow. So that was very early on, like lyrically where we were going. And I think we all knew that the sound would probably feed into the score. Like those two things are competing for space, so they can't just both, they can't be separate. So with Johnny, months before we started filming, he started looking into what the noise could be and how to achieve it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, pretty much with all our projects, like not intentionally, but kind of accidentally in some ways, the first person we've always shown is Johnny, who does all our composing for us, because so much of the creative of the film and the tone comes out of those conversations. I think we sat him down in front of like a Spotify playlist with like 90% of it's Meredith Monk, like 10% of it's like weird Mika Levi stuff, and just like develop the tonal world with him.
Well, and the sound itself was like, we all thought initially it had to be more magical, and like maybe we'd get like a gong or like a Himalayan bell to be the noise of these
the mysterious noise that creates the mystery, right?
Right, exactly. And in the end, we went for something very grounded, and kind of it worked, but it wasn't like cool or sort of.
It's not ethereal.
Right, exactly. It's very sound design and not like cool score.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to get into this conversation without spoiling. So I want you to talk a little bit about vocal performance and the sound design. Once we find out what's actually generating the sounds, it would have been really easy to have that be a big sound design element and to kind of go a little crazy with that. But it's actually kind of, and maybe you're going to tell me that this was budget dictated, but it's kind of a model of restraint. So I'm just mesmerized by the sound of the creature that we learn makes this mysterious sound. And so tell me a little bit about how you arrived at that. Was that a bit of an experimentation? How did you explore that?
It was massive experimentation because we had a physical actor who was performing the lines inside the thing that gets reeled inside the costume, who performed it in quite a storybook sing-song kind of way, which kind of made sense in terms of what we were doing at the time. And then so just on a practical level, did you have a microphone inside the costume?
There would have been absolutely no point, pretty much. Yeah, but all you could, I mean,
it was just garbage. The tracks were garbage.
It was just like Velcro, like every 5 minutes. I mean, it was like all the lines are like, I'm so sad to be in the hood, like it, because it's quite a big costume. And then we got to the edit and it wasn't really working. So Lindon went away and did a whole vocal performance of him acting as this character. And I remember a point where you went away and did some stuff during that there's a dance scene later on. And you did this like performance where you just like whispered everything. So you were talking to the other character. And it just worked so well. And I think we had that, and then we showed it to Kieran Hines, who ultimately did the voice of the character. And then, yeah, like, I think you're very good, but like did it as a proper performance.
Yeah, and I think actually even working with Kieran, he was... we had to keep on... I don't know what the technical term would be, but we were in an ADR suite, and we kept making Kieran go quieter and quieter. And the technician was like, guys, the mics are not going to pick anything up. And like, you've got to boost it. So like, he's literally like that, really whispering very close into the mic. Like Hannah said, that was we always knew it wouldn't be the audio from set, which was going to be used for the bear. But we spoke about like maybe it's 2 or 3 voices at the same time. Like maybe it's a child's voice and maybe an old person's voice, and we mixed them. And it was like you wanted actually in the end for the character to be super fragile and like almost fading away into like a really whispered.
You know, I've worked on another movie with Kieran Hines, so kudos to you for getting him. He's one of the greatest living actors that there is out there. He can turn it up. He can have a big booming voice when he wants to. So I'm kind of curious, was that his sort of decision to play it so quiet and so intimate? Was that something that you guys arrived at together?
I think we went, because we only had like an hour and a half with him. He's quite busy. So he was like, just tell me what you want. And we were like, it has to be really quiet and whispered. And yeah, and his instinct, even when he started reading the lines, he would sort of be a bit, you know, when you see the character.
It wasn't quite that. I think he was like 20% off, like what he came in the door with wasn't far off. Yeah. But we had to like pull it back. I did enjoy doing the grunt pass with him though, where we just got like a series of like breathing and grunt noises to kind of lay underneath.
But it's fascinating, the closeness of the miking and the softness and the intimacy of the voice. They contribute to this really abstract etherealness of the character. It's almost like you're hearing him as much in your head as you are through the air. It's a really magical thing. So, which makes sense because he's a magical creature. So it's a beautiful performance. Yeah, congratulations. The film is great. I've seen it now 4 times and just love it. Let's move along. Let's talk about the cost of hugging. Louis, you're up. So let me set this clip up. So this is a conversation between 2 people in a bar. We think it's a pickup. We don't know quite yet that something completely different is actually happening. But that's all you need to know at this point. We these 2 characters, we think it's a pickup in a bar, and let's roll that clip, Aaron.
And I am getting very exciting vibes from you, Erica. Where are you from?
London now.
Our fine capital. And what do you do there, Erica?
I have pandas at the zoo.
Sorry?
My job is hugging pandas at the zoo for their comfort.
Seriously? My God, that's incredible. What an incredible job. You are so lucky, Erica. And I'm lucky to have met such an exceptional... Oh, crap. I didn't mean to...
They're just so fucking moody.
Oh.
I'm so tired all the time.
Oh, but they're so sweet, they're so playful.
It's like looking after 8 incredibly cruel babies.
Well, dear me, I think maybe it's time for a new job for someone when they get back from holiday.
They pay me 90 grand a year.
They pay you 90 grand a year to hug pandas.
I won a competition in the 90s and they just kept me on now. Mortgage. My husband's business.
Look, I'm sorry I upset you. That wasn't my intention. Can we start over? Tell me something about yourself that doesn't involve pandas.
I can't.
I don't believe that. Tell me a secret. We all have secrets, Eric. There it is. Can I handle it? Should I strap myself in?
Raymond's asleep upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
A few more of these. I'm gonna go down to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna fill my pockets with stones. And I'm gonna walk into the sea until I can't feel the waves above my head.
This is gonna seem out of the blue, but I need to use the toilet urgently. Apologies.
So gonna work late tonight.
Louis, you made a wicked, wicked little movie.
Thank you.
I want to start talking about the music. Tell me about how you write that, because you I think because of the necessity of the setting and where the story is taking place, you're ending up kind of having to use that music almost like score. So tell me about the process of, how did you find that song? And was there a big experimentation process?
So I actually started off when I was writing it, and I knew I wanted to set it in Mallorca, in kind of like we shot it in that first bit in Ibiza, but in the places where English people go on holiday, and where there's this kind of I guess dance music culture. I guess I'm probably giving it the wrong nomenclature, but let's say dance music culture. And so I made a playlist to write to that was these kind of like big pop dance bangers, and like really helped me get in that. Because also, like, as in, I don't know if you've ever been to Magaluf, Glenn.
I have sadly, I have not had that.
So it's
pleasure.
There's lots of British people on holiday. It's sunny, like everyone's kind of like drunk. And it's like, it can be quite a sad place. I've been there. It can be a great place too, sorry, and I'm not putting it down, but I personally was sad there. But the music is pervasive, like, as in, and when you'll go for a quiet drink, but it's like there's constantly this like dance music there, bleeding into everything, and you're moving between like bars, and you get the clash of two like a bad beat match or something, and you're like, oh. But so I was, as I was writing it, I had this playlist I was listening to, and I got quite early on knew that a composer called, his artist name's called Friars, but he composes under Benjamin Garrett, that I wanted him to do the music for it, because he makes wonderful kind of melancholy electronic music, and also has like a wicked sense of humor. And I knew he would get this kind of thing where what I felt like we needed was like big dance track, but like that could also, especially a little later in the film, it kind of dips out into something kind of sadder, where essentially there's been this kind of melancholy kind of I guess it's not melody, like a harmony underneath, and everything else kind of comes out apart from this little kind of harmonic bit that kind of that's foregrounded. So I knew I wanted Ben to do the music, and we had a really fun day where I went over to his studio, and we just kind of like, as in exclusively, you get these like sample packs of like samples of drum samples, of kind of synth samples, and we were like, we're only going to use these samples, so that as in it doesn't feel like it's too new, or it's as in like we want it to be like of existing things that might have been used in other actual existing dance music tracks that might have been played in these holiday places. So we kind of started with samples and had a really fun time making these tracks, and then within these tracks, then kind of he built in these kind of the more melancholy moments that then are kind of unnoticed, but then when you strip everything else out, kind of come to the fore. So as in, we thought our music super early and just needed it to like kind of feel like quite oppressive, and like we like in the mix, just like playing with the levels. How loud can we get it? How much is like too much? When's it annoying? And kind of left it there, where it is kind of a little bit annoying. But yeah, it was like really early doors, big dance bangers. The first one's actually got me whispering over the top. You can't really hear it. If anyone wants the actual track, I'll send it to them. But I'm going, music is sadness.
It's all subliminal.
Yeah, I was quite happy with that.
It's working on us. Tell me a little bit about, so you're shooting on a practical location in Ibiza, right?
No. Yes, no. So the opening and closing shot is in Ibiza. Okay. The rest is in like, this is going online, a wonderful pub in Fulham in West London, who very kindly let us use their pub. And so yes, it's not in there.
And presumably you were able to control that location. They were not open for business when you shot.
They weren't open for business, but it was, I feel like anyone who's shot in a kind of
a real location,
in a real location, a bar, in a pub, as in there's like dozens of mystery fridges on where like the sound, the boom ops like can't do it, and you're like hunting in like back rooms for like fridges somewhere to turn off.
And you're trying to tell the manager of the place that you want to turn the fridge off.
But they let us turn the fridges off, thank you very much, to the pub. But as in, there was like then like one downstairs, and like we couldn't really find it, but as in it presented lots of challenges, and actually, it was a real like process of like cleaning up some of the audio.
Well, yeah, that was what I was going to ask you about, because your performances are fantastic. These two actors are really amazing. And look, that's a really hard scene, especially for her. You do not want to have to loop this in post-production. You want to spend the time and energy to get good, clean production tracks when you're shooting something like this. It's very critical. So tell me more, like what were the challenges of getting those tracks? And so you did have to do a lot of cleanup in dialogue editorial?
Did a lot of cleanup, yeah, unfortunately. I mean, thank you to Martin, the wonderful sound designer, who did a great job. But as in, it was one of those things where on the day, as in when you're making a short, you're really up against it with everything, So that location was at, how many days were you in that? Was it a 1-day shoot or 2-day shoot? It was 2 days. Well, 1 day in the front room, 1 day in the back room.
Got it, okay.
So
that whole thing at the bar, all that setup was 1 day?
Yeah, 1 day. And there's some rushed bits in there, Glenn. There's some bits that were like that third shot in the film, lucky didn't show in the clip, I'm so allergic to, because we just had to grab it anyway. But like, that's like visual yuck. But yeah, the sound is in. It was tricky to get. Like, we basically had to get to a point where we needed to shoot, and like, there was one mystery fridge somewhere in that bloody pub that I have no idea where it is. It was on for the whole time, and with the little dance between kind of lighting and sound and everyone, and everyone going, oh, we can't do this or whatever. We eventually got to a happy medium, and we knew we'd have to do some cleanup. And I guess the hard thing in cleanup is then when you're listening to the the dialogue tracks, and you're getting like a gate hitting it really hard, and you're and it's something that, like, on shorts you have really limited time doing your sound design, so and your mix and stuff and your cleanup, so you need to prioritize. But like, spent a lot of time trying to get it right, not making it feel too clipped, and letting the performance breathe, because I really hate when I'm watching something and I can really feel that it's had to be like chopped up to within an inch of its life, and it's been cleaned up so much that it loses all the organic feel. So that was like a big thing of finding this happy medium, and obviously the score helps as well, because that
having
fills
music
the gaps.
on that help. And you do have obviously there's group ADR as well. There's like people in the background yelling, that sort of thing. So you were able to cover up some stuff, but it's tricky.
It's really tricky, and I think but like, they're short films. They're like they're teachable moments, and I think that, like, if I was doing it again, which I won't, but as in I would on the recce, I'd be finding those fridges, and I'd be like listing them off, and we'd know which ones to turn off, and like, just try and figure out everything really carefully before, because it's like the amount of cleanup we had to do wasn't ideal, essentially.
Yeah. Well, as a sound nerd, my favorite moment in your film is that bit when she says, I want to go out and put the rocks in my pocket, and and there's a really beautiful, lovely thing that you do where you take the booming music and you kind of duck it out, and then you bring in the sounds of waves. And it's really, for me, what it does is sort of, it gives me the subjective experience of what she's thinking about. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, and then she says what she says, and then he has his reaction, the music comes right back in. So it's just this little moment of going subjective as opposed to objective in your use of the track. I'd love for you to talk about just your experimentations, finding that moment. Was that something that you thought about early on when you were writing? Was that a moment that happened in post-production? Tell us about that.
Well, I'll be honest, I thought of it early on. There's two moments of kind of, I guess, bigger sound design in it, that moment, and then the moment at the end where she's drinking, and we cut everything out apart from that little harmony. But I guess the nice thing about sound, when you're making like a film that's, ostensibly a comedy, for anyone listening on audio, I'm doing big bunny ears around the word comedy. But, the visuals are kind of pretty straightforward, linear, and the sound is somewhere where you do have some scope to play, and being more creative doesn't necessarily like pull the viewer out of it, as in if you're subtle enough. And so wanted a way of like getting into her head without it feeling too brash. And so, and actually that like cross dissolve between, the like diegetic kind of like music in the room and the kind of the beach, and there are some like weird little panda sounds low in there as well.
There are panda sounds in there. That's fantastic.
Pandas do not sound like what you'd expect them to sound like. In the like sound libraries, I was like, that's what they sound like. So that crosses off. We spent like far too long refining that, and like, because I really like, early on we were hitting it way too hard, and it was like music, beach, and it was really like, it was like a cue, and like, I really like bumping into stuff with sound. I think it's fun, but like that see, if you're pulled out of that moment, the whole thing dies on its ass. So it needed to be like so subtle. So we spent ages getting that right, and like, and another thing I'll say is that, like, as a short film filmmaker, I'm not used to working in like 5.1 or in like surround. I work in stereo. So it's like, I've made 2 shorts. I've worked in surround twice, But then, so as soon as you've got your audio, your dialogue coming from here, from the middle for anyone listening to audio, and then left and right, and the back, left and right, and the sub, as in, it's so different for me, and the levels are completely skewed to what I'd expect in working in stereo. So yeah, it was a real hard. It took us ages, and even now listening to it in different systems and different places, I'm like, we hit it a bit hard,
I think it works really well, but to your point, it takes a lot of experimentation, and it just reminded me of I said this yesterday, but it reminds me of a great quote from the genius sound designer Walter Murch that I always mangle, but he talks about sound as the back door that comes through through which the audience gets information, the visuals being the front door. But his point is basically, because the audience is not paying as much conscious attention to the sound as they are to the image, you can get away as a storyteller with a level of abstraction in the sound that is kind of shocking what you can get away with. And so that's a great example of just a really subtle like way to kind of take the audience there. So kudos to you. It's a fantastic moment. Let's take a look at There Will Come Soft Rains. To set this clip up, what do I want to say? Mira is our main character. She's very, very concerned that her father's gravesite, which is by a river, is going to be flooded because of global warming and climate change. And so she decides to take matters into her own hands and move him. That's a fair setup?
Yeah.
Okay, let's roll this clip.
Attempting to exhume a body under Section 25 of the 1857 Burial Act.
That's a serious offence. You understand that?
My family owns that grave. If you want to pursue exhumation, there is a legal process that you have to follow. Permissions, next of kin, burial site, and you do need a license. I was trying to save my dad. All right, listen, I don't think this needs to go any further.
Rachel,
Mira, I'm going to let you go without any charge. In the future, you have to go through the right channels. And maybe talk to someone.
There's so much to talk about in that clip. That's it's really amazing work, Elham. Just to start off, tell us a little bit about your conversations about sound design and how you engage your sound designer, and what did you tell them about the tone of the film and what you needed them to do?
Well, just to start off, like I didn't go to film school, and most of the things that I've learned along the way making films. And the one thing that I'm the most grateful for is the school of sound that I've kind of been exposed to. My respect for sound goes up exponentially with every film. I remember on my first film when I didn't know what anything was, I walked onto set and I was like, who's that guy? And he's like, that's the gaffer. Everything was new, and I was in the edit, and my editor said something that I hold with every film. And he said, what you see on the frame, it goes into your eyes and it goes up to your brain. What you hear goes into your ears and it goes to your heart. And that's something that I've learned with every film. And with sound, I often, in this film specifically, I've wanted to stitch scenes together with sound, because there are a lot of abrupt moments, and I think sound brings the marriage underneath it is what elevates character in the frame as well. Specifically looking back now, when we see Mira stopping to catch a breath, and then we hear the sirens in the back, and then there's a moment, and then she goes back in. That's an example of sound giving me an opportunity to show her character, where she knows the cops are coming, she knows she's in trouble, but her dad is calling.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love what you were talking about in terms of using sound as kind of a transitional element. Like I just wrote a note, even the ring out from the bus, that shot of her waiting for the bus, the ring out of that into the cemetery, you're really using the track to guide the audience through the story that you're telling them. And you don't necessarily think of like a cemetery scene like that as a opportunity for powerhouse sound design, but she attacks that grave with that shovel, and it's a much louder sound than it would, than it needs to, than would be literally true. But it speaks to her frame of mind. It speaks to the stakes. It's really, everything in that scene is just so gloriously done from a sound design perspective. And I love the fact that, as we were talking about earlier, using sound to give you a sense of the world outside the frame of the production. I love that we hear the sirens, but we never see the police, until the next scene. I mean, that's great. That means that you didn't have to pay for a police car and all the, all those people on the day. So in terms of like talking about the sound design, the scene with her in the hallway is a little bit more, there's more obvious stuff to talk about, but that the grave scene, the graveyard scene is just really fantastic. Can you talk about like how much time did you this is a very subtle, it's a very layered mix with a lot going on. So did you have a lot of time, in your sound design and your mix to kind of sort through this and find all these moments?
Yeah, we were really conscious to play with that scene specifically because the film starts so subtly. And the build-up, the crescendo is when the shovel hits the soil. And I wanted that to be a monster jumping out at the audience. Kind of the sound is the shock of the moment where, damn, she is digging up her dad's grave. And that with it coming out loud and in your face was something that we were aiming for from the beginning. But also specifically what we were doing, even with her, with the thuds as she's digging, that we actually enhance, so it sounds like there is more power, and kind of we get a glimpse into her desperation. And again, I'm such a disciple of sound now, because it just helps raise the bar and raise the stakes without me having to do that much on screen and having to spend that much more money. Do you know what I mean? Which is as a short filmmaker, we don't have much of anyway. So sound is a great friend, I think, And one other thing that I've learned as I've been making films is my sound always starts on the first frame. Even when we have the opening credits, even when you don't see picture, the soundscape and the world, you'll hear it. And then as the picture comes in, you're already in there without you realizing that the movie starts in frame one for me. And that's the sound.
I love the way you talk about that. I mean, and I think that a lot of filmmakers don't necessarily think about, well, like my story is an opportunity for creative sound design. But I think anytime you want to take the audience to a place and give them an experience, it's an opportunity for great sound design. And talk a little bit about that interrogation scene, because I actually love the ambiences in that. And again, talking about the world outside the frame, there's you establish like the two-way radio communication visually through what the police are wearing, but there's that kind of low-level cacophony in the background, and it just makes you kind of tense.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that we had to kind of clean up because we were shooting that scene in a Cypriot youth club, and the walls were really, really thin. And again, it goes to the talent of my sound designer to clean that up, Golden Masa. But we kind of wanted that tension embedded under that scene as well, and it's almost like a hangover from the previous scene of the graveyard, and that's something that we were conscious about to keep the tension up. Is she really in trouble? Like, what's going on? And to push the story that way. Yeah. And
then tell us a little bit about the next scene, which is her waiting in the hallway, and you kind of establish visually. There's a shot. There's the shot of the light on the wall, and I presume that's kind of reflecting through the water bottle up that's onto right. And then water obviously is a big theme. She's very much obsessed about water and the rising sea level and the what it's going to do to her father's grave. But talk about that. I'm just kind of interested in that sequence in terms of how you constructed the sound design for that, because it's very abstract in terms of the sound design, and you're really kind of you're communicating what's happening in her head as she's really thinking about this obsession with what's going to happen to her father's grave. So talk about engaging your sound designer and figuring out that scene?
Well, we had, like, sonically, we had her character arc mapped out, because throughout the film, the presence of water becomes more overpowering, and it becomes kind of more and more compelling, which pushes her to do what she does at the end of the film with her sister. And that's something that we were talking about during the sound design, because I kind of wanted it to sound like she's drowning. And all the tiniest of sounds of the water dripping, and just a sound of the water dispenser as it moves a little bit. I wanted that to be amplified, because that's us getting into her headspace, because she's getting crazier. Like, she tried to do this thing and her dad is still there, and she got stopped, but the obstacle is still there and she has to do it, and it's kind of overpowering, and it builds up and it builds up and it builds up. And that's something that, again, I keep saying it, but that's something that you can't do without the sound. You can't do without the abstract tensions rising, you know?
And obviously my question is, how much of that scene came together in post-production, or how much did you know you were going to do before you shot? Because obviously you had to get the elements visually that you needed to put that together, but did it evolve during the course of post-production into what we're hearing now?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite shots is the ceiling shot where we see the reflection, and that was a complete accident, because we were wrapping up to go downstairs to shoot the police scene, and then the sun just shone through the window, and I started freaking out. I was like, whoa, 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 bring the camera back. And we just held it up there for a bit. And when we were in the edit, that was something that was, that gave us the idea that maybe we can ramp up the sound of the dispenser and kind of connect it to the waves that we see in the thing. And that's the thing with filmmaking. There's lots of moments where God kind of gives you a gift. You know what I mean? Like, the universe smiles, and if you don't catch it, you miss it. So we were lucky enough to catch that, and in the edit that informed the evolution of the sonic journey that we were going on. Yeah.
We could have shown your entire movie and talked, because almost every scene has great stuff to talk about in terms of sound design. And so if you haven't had a chance to see the film, I highly suggest that you do. But there's another kind of favorite moment of mine that we didn't show, but Mira goes to her sister's house from whom she's estranged. And it's, she rings the doorbell, the door opens, and you can tell right away this is going to be a very tense conversation, because there's a lot of history we don't know yet, and a lot of anger. And when they're out on the doorstep, there's great neighborhood ambiances, a lot of stuff, the sounds of the neighborhood. And then Mira goes into the house, the door closes, and you drop the track down to almost nothing. And it just has this great effect of introducing tension, like, this conversation is not going to be good, that's coming. And you reinforce that from the sound. It's fantastic work. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, any questions in the audience?
This question is actually for you, Glenn. I was just curious, what is something that you wish more directors knew about working with their sound designer?
The thing that I wish that more directors knew about working with their sound designer, and I'm kind of curious to put this question to you guys. One of the things that I always tell young directors, especially writer directors, is have a conversation with your sound designer and show them, first of all, figure out who your sound designer is going to be, because they are as important to your film as the cinematographer and the composer and the costume designer. Figure out who that person is going to be before you shoot the movie. Have them read your script and talk with you about it before you even shoot, because they may have some ideas about ways to shoot a particular scene that would unlock really great moments for sound design that you're not even thinking of, because that's sort of not the way that you frame the world and think about it. So that's, like, at a simplest level, that's one of the things that I say. The other thing, which Louis, I'm sure you'll agree with, is it's hard. It's so hard, but take the time on the day, on the set, and make sure you get good, clean production tracks, because it's very, very, very few actors who can come back and replicate a great performance in ADR. I'm going to put this question to you guys. young filmmakers, what would you? I'm gonna pose it to you this way. What did you learn about sound design in this film that you would tell a young filmmaker who's starting out?
I think from Bear, it was probably at the very early conceptual stage. It was like, we're very visual, Hannah and I, our films often are very visually driven. I think Bear was the first time at the script stage we were like, let's write scenes around the sound design and how that's going to be. And it's like, it completely makes sense, like what you just said. And I think to even go further than that, like beyond just asking how could we capture this on set visually in a way that's going to enhance the sound, we were like, how can we write this at a script level that is going to make it sound focused? So yeah, that would be from me.
This was the first time we'd done dialogue in anything before. Like we've done a lot of music videos and commercials before. Most of what we do is like art designy, colourful, big set stuff. So we've done a lot of stuff, but not dialogue before. First time we've done dialogue. So I think I drove the sound guys absolutely mad because I was like, I can hear a crackle in the background. I was there with like the headphones on. They're like, no, that's just like the connector for the cable. I'm like, I don't believe you. and they were amazing, but I was so paranoid about our dialogue tracks not being clean. And like, luckily they were fantastic. If they hadn't been fantastic, then check, make sure your dialogue is clean, because you do not want to be doing ADR, especially when you don't, like most short films don't have budget to do ADR properly, so you want to avoid it just from a cost perspective, I'd say. And
also on most short films, you're not always getting a crew who sometimes it's really kind people doing a deal, but it's not always so 100% sure like what their aptitude always is. So like,
and my experience working with short filmmakers and making short films myself, the hardest person to get to work at a discount rate is the production sound mixer. So, you're really, you're kind of at the mercy of that person.
Oh, yeah. I think that for me, one thing I kind of learned on this and on the last one is in the edit, when you're building the offline edit first, you're putting in sound and you kind of maybe others aren't guilty of this, but I'm guilty of getting married to stuff because it becomes familiar and it becomes part of that world. And so then when your sound designer kind of comes in and rebuilds it or kind of offers their perspective, I don't know, I'm quite like closed off to some of it sometimes. I think that like on this one, I really pushed myself to be like, no, as in like Martin is the sound designer. Let him kind of, he knows the world too. And it was really fun watching him rebuild like all of the Atmoses but I think that previously in my first shot, I was quite like closed off to it, and I got really married to what we had in the offline. And I was like, just keep this sound is good. I'm happy with this, but that's bad.
But I will say that, I've worked on some really big movies with some really big directors, and temp love is an absolute thing. And the biggest directors suffer from it as well. And then you come in with some great sound design that you've spent weeks working on, and they're like, what is this? This is like, I've never heard this before. So the way you, at least typically what you try to do, the way you get around that is you, even before you're necessarily officially hired and on, as a sound designer, you start working with the picture editor, and they send you scenes, and you start sending stuff so that it's your sounds going into the cut, so that it's not a shock to the director. Because the last thing you want is for the director to show up on a mix stage and hear something for the first time. It's almost always a disaster.
Sounds expensive though.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, because the sound designer, they can work a day here or a day there and kind of work and do some stuff, or not charge for it.
I think in terms of working with sound designers, I would say this applies to working with any of the collaborators that you work with on a film set and in post and the edit, is I always work with people better than me, and that helps me because I learn from every process as well, and there's this trust as well that comes. And I guess a danger that many young filmmakers can fall into is to consider sound as an afterthought, which is just like the most dangerous thing you can do, I think.
Meaning like, I'm not going to worry about this until after I do my cut.
Exactly, yeah. And I think if you walk into a project and go, right, sound is an equal partner with my picture, then you're safe. Like the amount of disasters that you'll be faced with will reduce dramatically, and it'll be good for your film.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. This has been a great conversation. Thank you guys for showing us your films and sharing your clips and talking about your experiences doing creative sound design on these really amazing pictures. It's always a pleasure to be back at Aspen Shortsfest, and thank you for having me and letting me do this. Many thanks once again to Lindon, Hannah, Louie, and Elham for joining us on the panel and offering their insights into their creative processes. We also want to thank the incredible team at Aspen Film. Those are the folks who make Aspen Shortsfest happen every year and who partnered with us to bring this panel to life. If you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. And an extra special thanks to the students from Community College of Aurora and Colorado Mountain College, as well as the team from Aspen Film who captured and edited our conversation. We couldn't bring this to you without the contribution of these amazing people. Thanks for joining us.